My AP called my fiancé a weak man who cannot satisfy a woman. I agreed with him, not knowing this. Hello, Reddits. My name is Anna, and I'm 26 years old. Although I'm a graduate of a prestigious university, I don't work. And I mean, why would I ever? My parents are very wealthy, and I don't even have to lift a finger for the rest of my life. Yes, I'm a spoiled princess and the only daughter and child of my parents. I'm not here to brag about my parents' wealth. I'm here for something else. Something very important, and I need some advice. It's about my boyfriend Lucas. I did something really horrible to him, but I didn't even realize it. However, Lucas just did something way worse to me. He did something that has affected not even me alone, but my parents too, and now nobody wants anything to do with me, especially Lucas. And I really do love him, and I want him back. But Lucas wouldn't even talk to me, talk less, or allow me to apologize and make excuses for what I did. Lucas is a painter, meaning he literally paints people's houses and stuff like that. I met him when he got a contract to do the same for my new apartment. I was bored and had nothing to do, so I sat with him and watched him work. And then we had started a conversation, and it had been really nice, and I knew we just had to talk again. Lucas had always been a very shy person. Even in private, he hardly spoke and mostly just listened to me ramble on and on. Well, obviously, I was always the talkative. I don't mean I talk too much, but around Lucas, I tended to just say loads of things just to fill in the silence around us because Lucas hardly says a thing. He'd only make small talks or contributions to what I say. Although I have no idea how he got so many friends. People were always around Lucas, including the ladies, always seeking his attention. Although I wouldn't even try to lie, Lucas was quite an eye candy, and you can imagine that look he gets when he's smeared in paint in his work uniform, and with his body build. He'd look so sexy, and several times we had made love after he was done with work. I'd insist he did not take his work outfit off after he was back from work. We'd make love, and then I'd get the paint smeared on me too. After we were all done, we'd take a shower together. From the very first day I met Lucas, I was very obsessed with him. I loved everything about him. His smiley eyes, the teasing look he'd give me whenever he wanted to start foreplay before sex, the way he listened to me ramble on and on without looking bored by it, the way he thought of it as being his duty to buy me gifts after each work, even though we both knew I could afford them and more. I loved and still love Lucas so much. I had been the one who even asked him to be my boyfriend. Given the number of offers he got daily from ladies ranging from casual sex to friends with benefits to real relationships, I was actually surprised he picked me. However, Lucas loved me deeply as well. Despite his shy nature, he consistently showed me just how much he cared. We've been together for approximately 3 years now, and our relationship had been issue-free because of Lucas's deep understanding of me. My parents, after a lot of convincing, eventually saw just how much Lucas adored me and I him, and they gave us their blessings to go ahead. They loved him too, and they were pretty shaken by Lucas's decision to end things with me. Well, considering the fact that they don't even speak to me anymore, I guess they loved Lucas way more than I thought they did. You're probably wondering where everything went bad. You see, I loved everything about Lucas, everything except 2 things, maybe 3. They weren't the bad side of him, but I just didn't like it. I've always been a jealous person. I loved to have my own stuff for myself alone, and it pleased me when I did. I wrote above that Lucas really was an eye candy, and that girls flocked around him even knowing he had a girlfriend. Sometimes they'd get a random painting job for him so they could get to meet him, and it usually pissed me off. I would tell Lucas to scan through the job offers so he could decipher which was actually from the ladies who wanted him and people who actually wanted him to just paint. But somehow, Lucas just ended up falling for the same trick every time, and it made me mad, especially because of a particular lady, Martha, who just seemed to make it her life work to have Lucas. She'd hire people to act like they needed a painter and then give a location, even pay ahead so Lucas had no choice but to go, and then he'd meet Martha instead of the painting. I wanted to get a way to get rid of Martha forever because she just upset me, but Lucas would just calm me down and tell me not to worry about her. Another thing that usually made me upset about Lucas was his job. Lucas was actually born into a less privileged family, so he couldn't go to college after high school, and he had decided to just work. He fell in love with painting and arts on the walls, so he learned that, and he's been painting ever since. When we had met, I was really cool with his job. In fact, I found it fascinating and interesting, especially when I got to watch him work. The way he'd transform a house looking like some crazy nonsense into a beauty with just paint was intriguing, and I did not mind that he painted. Well, that was until the day Lucas and I had been out on a dinner date and I had bumped into Lucy. Lucy had been a nosy friend of mine in high school, and she had a way of looking down on people. Despite the fact that I was obviously richer than her, she found a way of looking down at me. When we had met her in that restaurant, it had been upsetting, especially because she chose to sit at our table with her date uninvited, and she had chatted on and on. She had even flirted with Lucas, and eventually, when she had asked of his job and he had told her, she did not even have the decency to hide her shock. She had looked from me to him and had smirked. She had then begun to ask Lucas about his painting job and how we had met. Unsuspecting Lucas had answered her questions sincerely, and it just made me more upset, and I couldn't touch my food. I lied I had a headache and wanted to go home to rest so we could leave, and when we left there and we had gotten home, I had lashed out at Lucas for being so unsuspecting of her intentions to embarrass me there. Lucas had apologized, but I had been so upset, I had decided to sleep in the other room. 2 years into our relationship, Lucas had started to hint at marriage, and every time he did, I discouraged the matter. I hadn't wanted to get married yet. I just wanted to be free like a bird without the attachment of marriage. Don't get me wrong. My parents had a sweet marriage, and they raised me with so much love and attention, so I knew how cute marriage could be, but I just didn't want to be married yet. I guess I did not want that title of painter's wife. I wanted Lucas to get a real job or go back to college and obtain a degree, but Lucas kept refusing to. He was fine with his job because, according to him, he earned enough to get by and also provide fully for his own family. And according to him, a college degree was useless in a painting job because if he indeed got a degree, he would still stick to painting. And that displeased me a lot. I loved him very much, but I wanted him to get a real job. One time, I even tried to get him to work in my father's company, but Lucas had been adamant and refused. I had been so stubborn about it, and I had gone to meet my dad to offer him a job. I thought perhaps coming from my parents, he wouldn't reject the offer. But Lucas had gotten home that day from my parents' place really upset, and he had told me he would never receive handouts from my parents, and even if he did get a degree, he would still not work in my father's company. It frustrated me really well because I knew how stubborn Lucas could be with some decisions of his. One time I had gotten invited to a party. It had actually been a birthday party, and it was a friend from university, and she had invited most of our friends too. I had gone without Lucas because I had felt I didn't want him embarrassed. Or perhaps it was because I did not want to embarrass myself. Unfortunately, Lucy had somehow been at that party, and she had made me so angry. She talked to them about my handsome painter boyfriend, whom I refused to bring to the party. She had even made a stupid comment. She had said if she needed a painter, which she would soon for her new apartment, she'd make sure to remember Lucas. To say I felt embarrassed was an understatement of my feelings that day. I had left the party rather early, and instead of going home to Lucas, since we started living together when our relationship became a year, I went to my parents' place, and when they had asked me why I was there, I lied that I missed them and wanted to spend time with them. I did not go home until after a week had passed. Lucas called and called, but I wouldn't pick his calls or reply to his texts. I felt if he hadn't been so stubborn about not getting a college degree or getting a proper job, then I would not have had to be embarrassed like I was by Lucy. When I eventually did go home, I kept giving Lucas an attitude. I wanted him to agree with my choice, and Lucas tried everything to appease me for another week except what I wanted him to do. Back when I was in university, I had met a guy called Jack. Jack had been my first boyfriend and lover. I had loved him so much at that time, and I hadn't even minded his very obvious flaws. He drank and smoked like a fish, and he slept around with many other girls, and everyone knew about it, but I didn't. I tolerated his smoking and drinking habits, thinking with time he'd stop. I did not know he was sleeping around. Well, I actually did know because many people told me, but I refused to believe because of how much I loved Jack. It was until the day I caught Jack with a friend of mine sleeping together before I broke up with him. It was hard, though, and because of how much I loved him, whenever he came back to apologize, I would forgive him and accept him back again. We kept breaking up and coming back together again. I started doing drugs to please Jack because I knew how much he loved how horny I got when I was high. I became so addicted to it all in the name of pleasing Jack, and I would spend all my money on buying drugs for both of us. Jack's parents had cut him off when they realized that he had been doing drugs and had refused to go to a rehabilitation center. So I sponsored him and also his habits. My parents had started to suspect my frequent requests for money, and they had found out about my addiction. I was dragged back home and forced to a rehabilitation center. I found out then that I was pregnant. I was pregnant with Jack's baby. When my parents found out about the baby, they had secretly requested a termination because, according to them, they did not want a bastard baby as their first grandchild. I had to pause a whole year of academics for all these, and when I had gone back, Jack had graduated. But somehow Jack still found his way into my life again. We continued our relationship, and I got back into doing drugs, but this time more secretly, because I did not want my parents finding out. I had gotten pregnant a second time, and when I found out and told Jack about it, thinking he'd be excited we got to finally get married or something, Jack had been so mad he had beat me up so severely when I had refused his suggestion to abort the baby. I had fainted through the beating, and when I woke up I had been in the hospital and I had apparently lost the baby. I had begged them not to call my parents because I knew they would panic, and then again, my parents' reputation would be ruined. If I never mentioned before, my father was a politician, so something like that would ruin his reputation. I had bribed the hospital to keep it quiet. Crazily, I'd gone back to Jack after he apologized to me. The final straw had been when I had taken some new hard drugs we discovered, and I had just gone into a comatose state. I only remember waking up in the hospital with my mom beside me. She told me I had been asleep for 2 months, and I had almost been declared brain dead. And I also discovered that Jack did not, for once, check on me. In fact, he had run when he saw me like that. It had been another friend of ours that we did drugs together that had been conscious enough to dial for an ambulance. I was home for another year, and this time I never went back to school. My parents bought me my certificate, and that was that. I was treated for depression, and I also went to a private rehab where no one knew me or my parents. It had been a tough time for my parents and me. So that had been the reason why they had been skeptical about Lucas when I told them. But they had apparently done a background check on Lucas and realized he had a clean record before they were finally convinced Lucas was good for me. Why I am telling this part of the story is because I saw Jack again. It had been a total accident, and I had been shocked when I saw him. Before then, I had never told Lucas about my ugly past, and I had never wanted him to find out because to him, I just wanted to look like a princess without blemish. When Lucas had shared with me his past about his parents and all, I had been tempted to tell him everything, but I did not want him disgusted by me. I had felt he would look at me like I was dirty, seeing as he did not have a past like mine. So I kept my mouth shut and never told him about it. As fate decided to play its hand, Jack happened to be a cousin of Lucas, and he had come visiting one day, and I was the one around because Lucas had gone to work. I was so shocked, and I had almost slammed the door in his face, but he had blocked the door from getting shut completely with his foot and had forced his way in. He had made sickening comments about me and had accused me of enjoying my own life while he had been in prison all the while because my parents insured it. He had threatened to tell Lucas about me, and seeing the panic in my eyes, he had realized that I had not told Lucas anything about him. He even was able to blackmail me, saying he had pictures and videos of me taking drugs and that he would take them to the media and destroy my dad's reputation. I remember back then that we had been feeling really high, and Jack had started to record me taking drugs and laughing like a whipped-up person, and the crazy thing had been that I had been naked. I did not know he still had the video because I had begged him then to delete them, and he had promised he had. Apparently he had not done so. I had begged Jack and promised to give him anything he wanted, and he had asked for some amount of money and that I was to bring it to him personally in a place of his choosing, and he had demanded I give him my number, which I did. It was a few minutes after he left that Lucas had come in. I was so shaken to even notice his presence until he had shook me. When he asked what was wrong, I lied that I was not feeling too well, and he carried me and took me to bed, made some food, fed me, and given me some medications, which I was grateful for because I had slept off. The next day my phone had rung, and it had been an unknown number, and I knew it had to be Jack, so I had quietly left the bed not to wake Lucas up and had gone to pick the call. My guess had been right, and he had requested I come to the hotel where he was and give him the money. I had pleaded with him to make an e-banking deposit instead, and he had gotten upset and ended the call abruptly, and when I had called him back he refused to pick my calls. I started to panic, but Lucas had by then woken up and I had to hide it. Lucas had told me we would be home all day that day together since he has nowhere he was going, and he knew I did not have to, so I had no form of escape to even go out to meet Jack. Well, Jack showed up at our place again. This time it had been Lucas who opened the door, and he had greeted him warmly. He was surprised he was out of prison and had even introduced me to Jack. He did not know we knew each other, well enough in fact. Jack had told Lucas he knew me from school, but he was sure I did not know or remember him since we did not have the same circle of friends. I knew that he had purposely said all that so he could tell me just how easy it was for him to ruin my relationship. Lucas had asked then if I knew Jack, and I had lied that I didn't. Jack had eventually left after about 30 minutes, but it had been the longest 30 minutes of my life, and I was so scared he would out me that my back had hurt from the rigid position I had it in. Lucas had proceeded to tell me about Jack, things I knew already, but of course Lucas did not know I knew them. He told me how he was put in prison because of a wealthy man's daughter and how it had affected their whole family, although he knew Jack to be a drug addict but not a killer. I couldn't say anything, but I had thought in my head, if he knew half of who Jack was, he would probably steer clear of him. Later that day, Jack had texted me to again threaten me if I did not show up the next day at his hotel with the money. I had agreed, and the next day, luckily, Lucas had gone to work. He had been offered a contract to paint a whole school, and since he mostly worked alone, he had to leave early. I had gone to meet Jack at the shabby hotel he rented, and I had taken the money he requested with me, hoping to leave as soon as I dropped off the money, but Jack had a different plan. When I got there, Jack had been in his underwear, which was almost nothing, and he had been smoking. It had been so long since I smoked, and the mere sight of it triggered the feeling I thought I had long buried. I knew in my head I had to leave the place instantly, but I found myself collecting the stick of cigarette from Jack and just taking one drag, and then another, and before long, I had finished smoking it. Jack had smirked and had brought out a small bag which contained drugs and had wiggled it in my face. I had just sat there with him on the floor and had taken the drugs. Maybe because it had been long since I took drugs, I was very high within seconds. Before I knew it, I was highly aroused sexually, and I was kissing Jack senselessly. In my sexually drug-induced state, reason had fled me, and I just had rough sex with Jack that afternoon. When I woke up, it was already so late, and Jack had been sleeping beside me, snoring like it was no one's business. I left quickly and went back home, and luckily Lucas had already slept, probably tired from the work he had to do throughout the day because usually he would wait up for me. I quickly crept to take a shower and I hid my clothes, which smelled like drugs and smoke, and I had laid down beside Lucas, unable to sleep because I felt guilty. The next day, when Lucas had asked me where I was throughout the day, I had lied that I went to visit my mom, and we had plenty of things to talk about. Lucas believed me because he knew how my mother and I could get when we were around each other. And that was how my full-blown affair with Jack started. He would even come around the house when Lucas was not in, and we would do our usual, get high on drugs and have wild sex. In my mind, I was just having fun. I did not love Jack again, but he was usually the only one who could handle my sex drive when I was high on drugs. I rented out an apartment for him when I got tired of going to the shabby hotel he used, knowing I could not book a room in a more comfortable hotel because of the fear of being seen. I thought an apartment would be the best option. I continued giving Jack money to buy us drugs, and we continued having sex and doing drugs. One time, Lucas had almost caught us in our half-naked drug-induced state. We had been at our place, the apartment I share with Lucas, and we were doing our usual, and Lucas had called me to tell me he was almost home because he had forgotten his favorite paintbrush. Lucas loved that paintbrush because it had been the first one he got when he decided to become a painter, and he had always had it with him whenever he worked. Although the paintbrush was quite old and does not really work well anymore, Lucas would still carry it around. He called it his lucky charm, and I never understood why he carried it around. So when he had called me, I had quickly, as best as I could in my drug-induced state, cleared everywhere and locked Jack in the guest bathroom. I sprayed everywhere with my expensive perfume to get rid of the smell of drugs and smoke. When Lucas had arrived, he had been surprised to smell my perfume all over the place, and when he had asked, I lied that I was cleaning and hadn't seen the usual spray we used, so I just used that since I wanted to get a new one soon. Lucas was not totally convinced, but he just shrugged and left after picking up his paintbrush. I started to insist we spent more time at the apartment I got Jack instead of the apartment I shared with Lucas because I couldn't risk getting caught. I did not visit my parents as often as I did before, and Mom kept insisting I did, and I kept lying about wanting to spend time with Lucas. A few weeks ago, Lucas started to behave really oddly. He started to ignore me while I talked, which was unusual. Sometimes he would just look at me and walk out and just mumble that he was going to work. I knew something was wrong, but whenever I did ask, he wouldn't say anything and just ignored me. I thought maybe it had something to do with the work contract he got and had eventually lost because the client had decided to use another person's work because of some external influence. So I hadn't really bothered about it. I thought he'd come around when he was ready. Jack and I continued our affair, and one time Jack started to mock Lucas for not being a real man who could keep a woman satisfied. I did not argue that fact with him, not because he wasn't wrong, but because I knew upsetting him would do me no good. He would withhold the supply of drugs from me, and I was already addicted again. So I just kept quiet when he mocked Lucas. Later that week, Lucas and I were invited to a housewarming party by one of his friends. And apparently, the person was also a mutual friend of Jack and Lucas, so Jack was also invited too. Lucas had asked me casually if I wanted to come or not, and I had accepted his nonchalant way of asking me to come with him. I had planned that after the party, I was going to confront him and put a stop to his silly attitude around me. We had gone to the party, and Lucas had stuck with his friend hosting the party and sipped his drink, leaving me alone to awkwardly socialize with people I barely knew. When Jack arrived, I got tensed up, scared that he would slip up and say something that would implicate us both, especially because of the way he was acting around me. Holding my waist and speaking to me like we were more than friends, I quickly extracted myself from him and went to stick beside Lucas to avoid any confusion. During the party, one of his friends had made reference to Lucas's job, and it had irritated me, especially because I saw Jack smirk. I drank my champagne too fast, and I guess that got me a little tipsy, and I started to talk a little too much. I talked about how much his work embarrassed me, how I have pleaded several times with him to get a real job, and how petty his choice of career was. I talked about it over and over again until Lucas had grabbed my hand from reaching for a third glass of champagne and had literally dragged me home. I woke up the next day with a pounding head, and Lucas was nowhere to be found. I thought he had gone to work as usual and didn't think anything of it, but he still did not show up throughout that day and the day after. I got worried and called his number several times, but he did not pick up or reply to my texts. It was another 3 days before I just suddenly started trending on the internet. Apparently, Lucas had gotten a hold of my video while doing drugs, and he posted it online, and some people started digging into my past, revealing my horrible past, and bringing them to life, and this affected my father's position as a politician. I cannot even go out anymore because of that cruel means Lucas used in ending our relationship. But funny how much I still want and love him. I really want Lucas back, and I feel terrible that I did all that to him. Please, guys, how do I get him back? I really do love him, and despite everything he did to me, I really do not want to lose him. Update. Hello, Reddits. This has been my worst nightmare so far. I have never been as humiliated, embarrassed, and shamed as I have been in the past few weeks. I'm stuck in a rehabilitation center again, with nothing but walls and walls obstructing me from seeing the sun. I have no one to talk to. I'm slowly losing my mind, and it's totally horrible living like this. When I was at the last rehab center, my parents, especially my mom, would come visiting. But this time, nobody even cares about me enough to come back. Jack was back in prison for illegal possession of drugs, and apparently he also sold them too. I am back in rehab because I have relapsed so much, and my parents just wanted to send me somewhere far away where the world wouldn't get access to seeing more of my ugly past. Lucas wants nothing to do with me, and that is the most painful part of everything. I lost the best man all because I was being stupid. I played with Lucas's feelings. I hurt him by cheating on him both mentally and sexually. I insulted his career like I had one myself. I feel so miserable, and the most painful part is that it took you guys to see that. Your hurtful choice of words and your very not-so-concealed hatred towards me made me see how selfish I was being. I feel so heartbroken and so upset. I'm angry at myself for letting everything come to this. I should have told Lucas from the beginning about my past. I should have told him about Jack. Maybe he would have understood. Maybe he would have made Jack stay away from me. Or maybe he would have just not gone into a relationship with me. I would never know now because it's too late for anything. I feel so drained and lonely. I hate this confinement. Sometimes I can hardly breathe because it feels like the walls are closing in on me. They all treat me like trash because they know of my past, and my parents made no show of letting them know just how upset they are with me, so they know they could never get reported. They would sneer at me, and even my therapist never could get through to me. I have literally become an insane person to everyone. Nobody understands me. Nobody understands my pain of losing the one true love I ever had, all because of my crazy addiction to drugs. I feel so horrible, and I don't even know what to do anymore. I will probably be like this forever stuck in my guilt, trapped in the nemesis of my own making. I would never get past this. I ruined my own life with my hands, and I could never get back what I lost. That thought alone is enough to lose one's mind, is it not? Even my therapist thinks so. Maybe I'll be referred to an asylum from here, though. Who knows? But what I do know for sure is that anywhere I end up will not be able to erase the feeling I have now. This feeling of emptiness and regrets. I know for sure that if this is an illness, then I probably will remain sick forever. I lost Lucas. I feel like screaming so loud, but I can't even do that here because I'll probably be restrained since I'd be considered uncontrollable. I never thought of things ending like this for me. Maybe if I had known of these moments, I would have stayed as far away as possible from Jack and his addicting drugs. I would never have made a joke of Lucas's career and played with his emotions. I would have loved and appreciated every moment I got to spend with him as much as I can. But it isn't possible now, is it? I'm here, just stuck, while the world is moving. I've lost track of time in here already because the day feels meaningless without Lucas in it. Sad. How I just ended up ruining every happy moment of mine with just a few months of an affair that was every bit as stupid as it was dangerous for me. Jack has finally ruined me. No, that's wrong, and I ruined myself. I cannot exactly blame the devil for what I did, right? And in this context, Jack really was the devil. Just how do I continue like this? How do I get past this? How do I survive this hellhole I seem to have created for myself? It's a rhetorical question, by the way, because I probably never will. Update. Hello, Reddits. It's me again, and this is my last post here because according to one of the nurses who just seems to hate me for no reason, I don't even blame her, seeing how much I hate myself too. I've been spending too much time on my phone typing nonsense, and it is affecting my mental health. Even though I do not see how it is anyhow, my phone will be confiscated soon, and I will be stuck staring at the walls all day and night with nothing to look forward to. At least your insulting comments got me thinking I still am being thought of, however negative it might be. But now I'll probably have nothing except my bare room and lonely world. I wonder how Lucas is doing. Probably better without me in his life anymore. He probably may have a new girlfriend now. Maybe Martha, who has been wanting a chance with him for like forever. The thought is killing, but I'm not a better choice now, am I? I really wish I had done things better. I wish I could go back and change everything. Be a better girlfriend and also never have agreed to do Jack's bidding and fall back into a terrible habit of drugs and rough sex. I wish I was not here right now. I wish I was with Lucas. I wish all of this was just a terrible nightmare that I'd wake up from soon. I wish for a lot of things right now, but I can't have them, because I messed everything up. I wish some of the pain I feel right now would take away even a fraction of what I caused Lucas. I know that Lucas will never forgive me, and if I were him, I probably would never forgive me either, but that does not stop my mind from wishing for things it possibly cannot have. I am forever stuck with this soul-wrenching guilt I feel every waking moment and the sweet, bitter dreams of what could have been, but never will now. Not now, not ever. I sure hope that no matter how much you hate me, you'd at least not end up like sad and lonely me. Thanks and goodbye.